So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to leverage automation the right way within your IT operations in 2021. My name is Adriana Bombacci, and I'm part of the business development team here at Oxys. So as a reminder for all attendees, your microphones are muted. They're going to remain muted. So should you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the questions or chat section, and then we will make sure to address them during the panel discussion or at the conclusion of the webinar. Now, quickly to introduce our speakers for today's session, we have Álvaro Prieto, who will be leading the panel discussion today. He's Oxys co-founder and the head of our IT services, including both consulting and outsourcing. Álvaro brings over 25 years of business and IT transformation experience across hundreds of clients and more than 15 different industries. We also have Brad Boomer from our RPA partner UiPath. He leads the contact center, customer experience, and help desk automation practice for the Americas. Brad brings over 18 years of experience in the call center and automation space, having previously worked at Microsoft, Accenture, and EY. We also have the pleasure of having Kate Klavett, product marketing manager from our partner OpsGenie. OpsGenie is owned by Atlassian, who is a leading incident management platform, and you will learn a lot more about it as part of our webinar today. And lastly, we have Eduardo Diquez, who's the director of the Intelligent Automation practice at Oxys, with over 10 years of experience in process improvement and business transformation. He has a great track record implementing and scaling automation programs across a wide range of functions and industries. So again, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. And with this, I'll turn it over to Álvaro to get started.
Thanks, Adriana, and thanks everyone for taking the time to attend our webinar today. As Adriana mentioned, I've been in IT for quite some time, over 25 years, and I spend the majority of all this time helping IT organizations of all sizes improve the way they run and operate their technology functions using a combination of consulting and outsourcing services. Now, I've been fortunate enough to have worked with hundreds of IT shops, and one of the things that a common issue that we see in all these years and still see in most IT organizations is when we go visit them is in general is a low level of process maturity and controls, and in general low levels of automation. So this topic in particular is extremely exciting to me, as you will see later, and we get into more of the specifics of what's going on in the marketplace with these technologies. But however, one of the trends that has not changed and it continues to grow is really the increased level of automations in IT. IT is now becoming more of a central role and more strategic role for most IT organizations, and if not all IT organizations, IT is a strategic role. And the complexity of working today in an operations environment has really changed throughout all these years. Is no longer kind of you have your own infrastructure and servers. Now you have hybrid environments. There's a lot of security issues and security complexities that we're dealing with. So the complexity levels have increased tremendously. That has not changed, and I am sure that your budgets in IT has not increased accordingly to the complexity levels that you're dealing with. So when you have this combination of high complex environments and low process maturity with automation, with no automation, that leads to a lot of inefficiencies in running IT, poor levels of support, poor scalability, and a lot of and obviously a high risk to run operations in that way. And that's one of the things that we've been helping organizations with, is really addressing how to make their operations more scalable, less obviously reduce the risk and run it more efficiently. So that's a combination of processes and technology, and obviously having the right people. But the name that is being used today for around this topic is called ITPA, or IT Process Automation. You probably have seen some names like AI Ops or artificial intelligence operations, which we're going to touch on that a little bit later. So today we're going to cover some of the industry trends that we're seeing. This maturity scale that we have a maturity ratings that we have used to understand where organizations are in their IT journey. And then we're going to, more importantly, talk about some really specific use cases in IT that we are seeing in the automation space, which are very exciting. Now, the trends that we've been able to pull up, and IT process automation in general, I would say it's a little young. It's not fully mature yet, and that's what we are seeing a tremendous increase in this topic and attention in this topic. But we're seeing the same things in what the trends are showing us as we're doing this type of work, is that CIOs taking a much more bigger role in organizations from a business perspective. IT is obviously becoming a more strategic role for most companies, and there's an increased adoption of automation technologies and growth in this market. A lot of spend in the market as well. We're still in the early stages, but the trends are just very exciting and interesting. So it is the right time, and as you'll see in the next slide, we've gone through an evolution in the automation space. Starting with way back in the day with batch processing and so on. And we are in today's, what we're seeing today is a lot of companies that are just basically using workflow-based technologies. They have basically, if you look at the first three buckets here on the evolution of automation, a lot of companies are really using some form of that, right? Some form of scripting, some form of workflows, which are typical technologies that are embedded into their, let's say, their service management platform, or some of the key operating technologies that they use to run and manage their IT department, like, let's say, your monitoring systems and so on. And some organizations take advantage of scripting to enable integrations between these systems and operate and execute some routine tasks using script-based technology. And then there are some companies that are more in the DevOps space that are typically are companies that are developing quite a bit of software, and they need to have the automation of deploying that software into production systems without the need to have infrastructure resources stand up those type of environments. So a lot of automation is put in place, and that really happens a lot in companies that are doing quite a bit of development work. But the interesting thing here from an evolution perspective is what is on the right side of the slide, which is the introduction of newer technologies like RPA and artificial intelligence. And we're starting to see quite a bit of these technologies is starting to become front and center in most IT operations that are looking to run their operations more efficiently. And RPA in general has been something that has been adopted in the business side first, and it's been a trend for quite a bit of years. And now we're seeing RPA really getting into the IT shops, and it's starting to really leverage that technology to enable a lot of process automation in operations. And then we're seeing the same type of things moving into AI, and even some of these RPA technologies, evolving into AI-based type of solutions, more intelligent solutions, and so on. So it's obviously very exciting to see how this is happening, because in general, RPA, automation is costly. It's been costly. If some of probably you've been involved in BPM or business process management solutions, which are very expensive and cumbersome and difficult to support and maintain and acquire. And now RPA is becoming something that is really helping. It became more affordable, much easier to implement than ever before, without the need to hire a bunch of developers and so on to put these type of technologies in place. Now, in the next slide, if we go into more what we see from a maturity perspective, this is something we have developed using a process maturity model, that the typical capability maturity model from Carnegie Mellon for process maturity. And we have and what we've seen, or at least, we're dealing with this all the time, is looking at organizations and where they are in their journeys from a process perspective. And there is a direct correlation of process maturity and automation. So the key obviously is you gotta have standard processes, repeatable processes that are being measured on a regular basis. And that's what defines the maturity for most organizations that are focusing, adopting more structured processes to run their IT operations, which obviously has tremendous benefits of doing that. But when you couple the process maturity with automation, then you're really moving the needle, as I call it. Then you're becoming a lot more effective, because these processes in general, and most companies in IT, or at least IT operations, don't really adopt processes because it's cumbersome. Sometimes they have to go through a lot of steps and forms and information they have to provide, and then they have multiple teams executing different things and so on. But when we have automation and you take those processes and automate that's when you start really seeing tremendous, improvements in the way that IT really runs. So, we go from when you have no automation to companies that have programs, they have developed their own programs, they have acquired technologies to automate across the board, right? Not just buying, let's say, something like a ServiceNow that is a service management platform that automates a bunch of processes from an incident change and so on. But RPA, for example, or some third-party technologies such as RPA can really help address not just a key system like ServiceNow. It can go beyond that and go into infrastructure, go into hardware components, go into multiple systems that perhaps there's no quite an automation roadmap for those specific products. So it kind of puts it all together and makes it and execute those processes accordingly. So one of the things that comes to mind all the time, and just to start getting into use cases, is the onboarding of an employee, right? When you look into how many companies, and when we look at data from companies of how they're doing things, we see that they're spending a lot of time onboarding people and offboarding resources from the organizations. And that takes quite a bit of time and a lot of steps. I mean, we have seen some companies who take up to 50, 60, 70 steps just to actually take an employee off their organizations. And that's something that is very prone for errors, prone for mistakes, and from the folks and the multiple teams that are executing these processes. And that's a perfect example of where a robot or some automation technology can really help, right? So so it's always interesting for us to look into where companies are at, and then really help them put a program in place to really move them across this scale, which in some cases it creates a competitive advantage for a lot of organizations, and delivers quite a bit of innovation and as well as performance in IT operations, right? So so I think yeah, at this point, we want to share with you, when you register into the website, we ask you a question as far as where you are in this maturity scale, not necessarily the maturity scale that I just show, but really where you are in terms of automating certain things in your organizations. And the majority of you, or the third of the participants, are between no mature and moderately mature, which is no surprise. I mean, I assuming not understanding exactly what areas you're automating in particular. You're probably using some of those script-based technology, perhaps some workflow-based technology that is in the systems that you use to run IT. But I would probably bet that not many of you are using RPA in IT, and that's one of the things that we want to discuss, and also talk about some other systems like Opsgenie to really help with the incident management process, which is a common, obviously, transaction in IT. Now, when you get into that, it's getting now into the specifics of technology, of the shop itself. There's obviously multiple domains that IT supports and delivers services for. And UiPath, our partner, has really put together a tremendous landscape, as I call it, of all the different domains within IT that are candidates for automation. So if you look at this slide, without getting into any particulars, right? Pretty much the entire operation in IT has a tremendous opportunity to be automated, especially if those processes are defined. If you have, let's say, some run books or some specific SOPs or procedures that are being followed on a regular basis, you bring a technology like this, and then you really are taking advantage of, the agility of implement also of automating these type of processes. So if you go into any of these particular domains, let's say, and we'll have a slide later to get into it that Brad is going to walk us through. If you get, let's say, on the end user support side of things, which is a pretty common thing, this will expand into multiple different functions within that specific domain that have the candidate that shows how much you can automate in that space. I mean, if you look, for example, at chatbot technologies today, which are becoming more intelligent in nature, is not just chatting anymore with an agent. You're talking to a robot that is connected to a telephony system and is fully integrated into Azure or is fully integrated into any system in general. Then you will have what I call zero touch tickets, when you don't have humans really doing any kind of that intervention, and that really drives a lot of savings in an operation. Plus, it delivers a good experience for the end user. So you have technologies that can improve the user experience, as well as really technologies that can really improve the back end side of IT operations in general. So with that, I wanted to just have our first polling question, and if you don't mind taking just a quick a few seconds of your time to really answer, what areas of your IT operations are you most interested in automating today? So if you can take just a couple of seconds, we can then share the results, and then we can I can go in to introduce our panelists and ask them some questions. So as you do that, as you see, as you do that, let me introduce the panel. I know we have, Adriana mentioned, we have someone from Opsgenie. His name is Kate Klavett, and then we have Brad Bumer from UiPath, as well as Eduardo from Oxys. So we're gonna welcome you guys to the panel. But before we get there, let me just share with you some of the results. So. And it's interesting here from the response, from as far as the top one being service management. As you know, service management it makes actually a lot of sense, because the service management processes, the incident management, the change, and all these processes that are typically in IT, using the ITIL framework, which is primarily the framework that we use for running and operating effective IT organizations. Those are the highest, that has a high potential for automation. A lot of the service management solutions today, at least the good ones, have workflow technologies that enable a lot of those processes to be automated. But what is great about it is and that is where you start really looking into more integrated solutions like RPA or so on, that can help take the processes outside the service management environment and move it into the hardware side of things, for example, to provision things for you automatically with the robots taking care of those processes. But then, I also see that data center operations, which there's a lot of opportunities in the data center operations space, especially around controls and things that need to be checked on a regular basis. One of the most basic ones that we always see failures on is your backups, right? Just to see, I know it's a super simple example, but some companies are having issues just making sure that every backup is really executed properly, and the type of controls that they need to have to make sure that is actually happening. So typically it's done by humans, checking logs and so on. These are perfect opportunities for robots and different script technologies to make sure that those things are happening. So anyway, I appreciate the responses there. So now let me just go into ask introduce our panel, and as I did, and ask some questions. Let me start with Kate. So Kate, why don't you do a quick intro on yourself and tell us about your particular technology, how it's helping IT organizations today with automation. Kate?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Kate Klavett. I'm a product marketing manager at Atlassian, and as Alvaro mentioned, Opsgenie is one of my main products. Mostly work on the IT operations side of our products at Atlassian. I've been there for about 3 years and have been in the product marketing space for almost 10 now. When it comes to IT operations, I think one thing that we're kind of most shocked about is you assume that if a company is larger, they're going to have automated their IT operations process. But you'd be shocked at how many Fortune 500 companies we speak with who are still using a very rudimentary process. Knowledge sharing is still on Post-its. And that's kind of our typical IT environment. This is something we're trying to move away from. As you mentioned, if we don't automate, we're really going to be left behind and really doesn't allow our teams to deliver value quickly if we're stuck in the 1990s using something like that would remind you of something would be top technology when screens were still orange on computers. So here we've got that. You've got your IT dev stack and your monitoring tools, and then you have your operations teams, and they're just getting alerts from all directions. As I talk to customers, like I said, I'm still shocked that so many are still using a single email inbox to sift through all those alerts. So what Opsgenie is doing is it's giving you something that sits between your monitoring tools, your ITSM tools, and your teams. So when something goes wrong, they're going to receive that alert. And that alert's going to come with a lot of context, and it's going to automatically be dispatched based on source, content, time, and the on-call schedule. So we're really automating the notification process for you, but also providing you all the information needed for the next steps as well.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, this at least from our perspective, we manage, thousands of devices, and so for customers, it's been a massive improvement as far as the time that we have used to execute our response, and also the intelligence that you have to build in your network operations center, if you have a network operations center, to be able to know what to do with every single alert that comes in. Now, it takes some time to obviously train the system, but it's the same as if you would have to train a human. Let's say you have some turnover and you have to train them on what to do with these things, or write up all those procedures. So instead of doing all that manual work, you may as well put the intelligence behind every alert, and then you really start have an operation that can truly scale. So it's great technology, lots of intelligence behind it, and I'm glad that you can join us here, Kate, today. So Brad, let me move into Brad, and Brad is with UiPath. So Brad, why don't you do a quick intro, and same as Kate, and tell us about your particular technology, how it's helping with automation today.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Brad Beimer with UiPath. So my role within UiPath is I help lead our contact center practice. And what that means for us is it's really a lot of different areas, but what I'm going to focus on today is around how we help IT with help desk automation, how do we help HR, finance, and other parts of the business with general service desk automation, probably focusing a little bit more on the IT side, of course, today. When we think about automation, how it applies to the contact center and the interactions that employees have with an IT help desk, it starts off with self-service. So what can we do to help automate emails? What can we do to help automate those phone calls and do more self-service inside of the IVR? If we can use chatbots to be able to help facilitate some of those use cases or some of those call reasons why employees are calling in. We got a saying around self-service that sometimes the best call is no call at all. But we also recognize that sometimes there's going to be a need to actually talk to a person, to talk to an agent. So this is where we actually, once that call comes through or an email comes through, whatever interaction type it might be, a live chat, for example, as well, we can help automate the process so that the agent has a robot that's actually working with them while they're on the phone, working on the email, working on the live chat, and working through the employee's issue. Now, the other part that we help out with is the automation of a lot of those handoffs. So a handoff from one tier to another tier, maybe a handoff to someone that needs to perform some actions inside of a security system, ERP system, a CRM application, maybe hand off to an administrator for those. We like to say that those handoffs are ripe opportunities for our UiPath robot to be able to come in and help automate. May not automate everything, but we can automate at least maybe some of those first upfront steps, some of the middle steps, some of the back-end steps to help alleviate some of the work that a person has to do and free them up to do other things as well. There are a few use cases on the screen. The ones we see most common, especially starting out in help desk automation, are your account password reset, account unlock. But there's also help me find something. So there's also an aspect of being able to unleash the knowledge base article and those standard operating procedures out through a chatbot. So that way someone can ask a question and we can use natural language processing to try to answer that question. So they don't need to talk to a person. They can have that support 24/7. You see a few other things on the screen there as well. The last ones that I'll talk about, and I think, Alvaro, you've already talked a little bit about these, is just employee onboarding, employee offboarding. COVID, with COVID, we've seen a lot of requests and a lot of automations around deploying new RSA tokens or security cards so that people can access remotely through VPNs. But, those are some of the key use cases and really some of the key things that we do. So I'll pass it back to you now.
Yes, thank you, Brad. Yeah, I mean, and one thing I don't know for the ones that may not know much about UiPath, but UiPath is one of the leading, if not the leading technology right now around the world for RPA. So it's not only a technology that help address automation in the IT space, but also goes beyond. I mean, it's been implemented primarily at the beginning in the business side, and that's when I said earlier that it's very exciting to see how it's now getting used in the IT space. But one of the things that absolutely is a tremendous benefit is when you look at having a technology like this in your IT shop, is a real tool that you can look to basically glue everything that is perhaps not connected to each other. So it's very interesting when you start looking at, okay, how I can, let's say you have Citrix sessions that are providing some information and you have something else going on in your monitoring system and you need to do, for whatever reason, something between those two things. If you have this type of technology, you can basically connect those type of things without having to go and write code or do things like that, hire a development organization to put this together. So it's a tremendous tool. It's like a true Swiss Army knife, as I call it, to making sure that you can really integrate and put and automate a lot of your processes in IT. So I've found that from our own experiences that almost everything that is done by a human using a procedure can be automated using this type of technology. So it's a huge statement, but it is very true. I mean, we're actually going through that ourselves with our customers internally. So we're saying we're eating our own dog food with this type of technology, and the benefits are tremendous. And we're going to talk about benefits in a minute, but let me ask you, Kay, back to you as far as some of the things that, what are the typical IT automation use cases that you see your customers implementing with your technology?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers, as I mentioned, the use case is automating that notification piece. Especially the larger companies, they have hundreds of services and microservices that they're keeping online. So part of the automation is definitely automating that notification piece. So are you going to notify them via phone call, text message, and then providing the context, as I said before. So the context really helps them take the next step with that. Common use cases include folks who are going on call for various services, etc. And then we also have like the automation of the incident creation, right? So we know that when an incident starts, whether it's in production or hardware, software, various items, we know that the teams that have the best shot at fixing it are the ones who are going to be able to get together quickly and swarm on the incident. So we also will take notifications from your monitoring and ITSM tools and provide those notifications. Will create an incident based on parameters that you set. So for example, if you are working on, say your AWS EC2 instance goes down and you're getting a heartbeat from that letting you know this has gone down, Opsgenie will create an incident for you and then notify all of the IT staff of that incident so they can get together and start working on it.
Perfect. That's great. And that saves quite a bit of time, right? Of making sure everybody jumps in quickly into a bridge and start really, addressing the issue, which is part of a true good incident response practice, right, in any organization, especially around security. So there's a lot of things that happen in that space from an incident response, and your technology is key to make that happen a lot more effective. So now I wanted to, now we have Brad. Brad has an actual demo, and it's actually interesting when you see a robot in action. And so we have this demo that Brad is going to walk us through. And Brad, so why don't you tell us what the demo is about, what exactly is going to be doing, so the audience can follow what's happening.
Absolutely. So a common request that we see are those high volume, low complexity requests. So for example, I need to change I'd like to make a change to my email alias, or I need to make a change to my address, or we talked about password resets. In this particular example, you're going to see a username change. Now I know that doesn't happen quite often or a lot in an IT help desk environment, but the idea here is that you can use a UiPath robot to facilitate some of these changes in the applications, which helps reduce the amount of time that a person needs to spend on doing these steps. And that's automating the creation of the ticket and a ticket management system, automating the updates in the other line of business systems that need to be updated too. Now, the first part you're seeing here is actually the integration with the phone system. So this is where we can, in this case, we're going to simulate a call. And when that call comes in, we can actually detect it. So we can provide a screen pop if there isn't already a screen pop in the contact center. So here we're doing and creating a quick case and lookup and case inside of the ticket management application. And we're going to save this. Now, everything that you're seeing is happening on the right-hand side of the screen, upper right-hand side of the screen. That's a UiPath robot that's automating going out to maybe a mainframe application to make an update to the username. There's going to be some other applications that you're going to see too. And I mentioned earlier that the robot works side by side with the agent. Well, the agent's on the screen making changes here. They're talking to the person that's on the phone call, helping them solve their problem, while the robot's off doing the mundane task of all that keyboard entry and other things that need to happen. So here we're just walking through the claim. So the agent's taking a few actions here on their own to get things to a completed state. So the next step is actually going to be to close this out. So there are a few additional steps that we need to take here. And we can see that our demo team likes to use creative names. So our actual customer is Tom Cruise. So we're going to update the username, the one that he likes. But again, this could be anything, right? So we're showing username here, but this might be a update to their email alias, might be an update to their address, might be an update to any of those variables that can be changed. So then you're seeing the robot on the right-hand side make the changes. We're done. We complete the call. Now, one part that you're not seeing here is that there was actually a robot running in the background that captured notes. So the notes are actually being entered into the ticket management application in this case. So we're all done, and we're going to see the agent just finish things up. So you didn't see the notes because the notes are actually entered automatically, and that saves, what we tend to find is that saves about 20% off of the call time, which frees those agents up to be able to take more calls, so employees aren't waiting in the queue as long.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's I mean, it's interesting to see, I mean, something happening in the background, and when you have an automation technology like this, I mean, there's multiple flavors of it within the RPA space, but if you have what is called an orchestrator, which is this basically machine on the back end watching how all these processes are executing, you can have multiple things going on at the same time, not necessarily one-to-one, let's say. It could have simultaneous things happening, and that gives you obviously more scalability on the automation side of things. And a lot of these type of things to actually configure and set up is not as perhaps as one of the things that we wanted to talk about is really discuss some of the benefits and the implementation challenges and opportunities that we're seeing with customers. So we're going to discuss that with three of you, but let me start just let's get into some of the benefits in general that we see in the business cases that you typically see in IT. So let me start with Eduardo from Oxys. Eduardo is a true practitioner. He's actually doing this on a on a day-to-day basis. So so let's Eddie, why don't you talk to us about some of the benefits and key drivers that you see in IT automation bringing to to customers.
Thanks, Alvaro. So naturally, the first inclination of everybody looking at automation is really cost reduction. In the past, from the beginning of RPA and I guess the birth of intelligent automation, that has been a lot of the talk for years on end. But I think that now things are shifting. People are trying and seeing after they have implemented, yes, there's cost reductions, but productivity improvements and accuracy and efficiency gains, and truly bringing better experience to the customers and their employees, and being able to do more with less and becoming more scalable operations has been the main driver of growth within IT operations as part of their IT. At the beginning, naturally, you're looking for ways to get a quick payback on the automation, and has been a trend coming in the past 3 years of being able to implement a lot of these processes that you were talking about very effectively with great business cases. But it has really expanded out of the ability of organizations to provide better, more accurate solutions, being able to hit their service level agreements, which has always been a big priority for organizations, and being able, having to rely on humans to, interact with these tickets immediately has always been a struggle for organizations. So automation has really brought that capability of being able to provide, digital workforce on a 24/7 basis, and being able to react to these incidents in like you were saying, hardware infrastructure to monitoring to closing tickets automatically to access controls very quickly.
Yes. Yeah, and Brad, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think on this side, just in general, from deploying our automation and our robots, on average, our customers see about a 40% reduction in their average handling time, which is oftentimes the way these things are measured. But the other way to really look at it, and the way we're trying to measure, or one of the measures that we're trying to use more often, is self-service adoption. How many calls are we able to deflect? Because that's where the real savings is, and benefit is, because you're, one, helping. Those robots are able to help an employee 24/7, 365. They don't have to wait until business hours to be able to talk to a person, to be able to fill what should be a routine task. And the other part is that, so you have increased employee satisfaction, but the other part is that's a cost reduction as well. So it's a rare win-win with increasing experience and also reducing costs.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I definitely agree. I mean, one thing that is not necessarily, the first driver is immediately going into a cost reduction kind of mode. First, want to achieve some efficiencies, right, on the process itself side of things, and then you can start, identifying opportunities to, if anything, to reduce your labor if it's taking less, or assign that labor to do other more interesting things. I mean, interesting trend in some cases is when you freed up resources from doing those mundane tasks or repetitive tasks, and then you use them. Sometimes some of them can be moving to becoming automation specialists, right? So it's just kind of like they start really working with the robots to start, doing more automation for their own particular functions that they're working with. But efficiency for sure is one of the first things that, it has to be measured, and it is obviously very very telling, right? I mean, it's right there on your face. I mean, once you actually do it and you see that you don't have anyone really doing that type of work, I mean, immediately you get efficiencies. And we actually call it the zero touch ticket, which is kind of our own word, which is something that is, and we're executing on this when you actually have requests coming from self-service, and then the bot, in this case, if he's interfacing with the user or the requester, is calling the bots, executing those processes, and returning the result without having anyone being involved in that process. So I mean, it's easily done, obviously, with password resets and AD, attribute updates and things like that. but you can also do what we discussed before, the onboarding, offboarding employees, where HR generates that request, whether it's from a bot or it could be generated from their own service catalog if they have that service catalog automation process, where they can request those services to be executed, and then the service catalog will call in the bots to execute that. So there's plenty of different things there that can be applied. And when you start really, when I started getting into this technology, you start looking into like, wow, we can actually do all these things so effectively. I keep saying that this is one of the technologies that I've seen that has the highest return investment that I've seen, at least from efficiency perspectives, and it delivers it so quickly. So very, very excited about that. So Kate, anything on your side from a benefit perspective? Yes.
Oh no, I just want to say that there is a question from the audience. How do we prioritize investment in IT when there are better use cases in other functions? Are you seeing that issue with other clients, where basically they are moving faster in other functions but not in IT?
Other functions not in IT. So the question is, how do you prioritize the investments on these type of technologies, or in this particular?
How do you get the management team to prioritize opportunities in IT when the other functions are coming up with better business cases and basically they are not getting prioritized in the initiative?
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, you really have to go through the exercise of identifying what are the candidates for automation, of course, and really what we call just go after the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit in IT are typical processes that are highly repetitive. If you have a lot of transactions going on in that particular space, your business case will support, that as a say. It could be that you're having service performance issues, or you're having, continuity issues with the service on the service side of things, or poor levels of service, or whatever that could be. There's multiple ways to look at them. If you look at this screen here, and you'll find that there's different drivers, and that is what drives the business case. But absolutely, obviously, if there's other things that have a much higher return from a business perspective, they're going to take priority. But in what we're saying is, you got to go through go through the exercise of going in the business case. We see it day in and day out when we just collect information from our customers. We analyze it in our BI platforms and really see, all the different opportunities that exist to automate, their tickets and so on, and what the impact is on the labor perspective and on the, customer experience perspective. So there's multiple drivers here, but what I'm saying is you gotta do the business case. There's no specific ones that is going to be better than maybe other initiatives in IT. But what we see is, back to my point earlier about the complexity increasing in IT and the risks that we're exposing the organizations by not really doing things, in an automatic way, in a consistent way, from a process perspective. So this is no longer kind of a luxury to say, hey, I want to have great processes and run my metrics. It's a necessity. Otherwise complexity is going to eat these IT organizations alive, and then we're going to end up with, massive impact to the organization. So it's really about going and performing the business case. From a technology investment perspective, it's not like we're talking some massive numbers, and that's one things we're going to have an offer later to actually work with some of. If you're interested in learning more about this, we can discuss a specific use cases for your organizations, and in an assessment that we're going to offer at the end of the webinar. So stick around. So let's move into now the implementation of these technologies and some of the common issues that they see with the adoption also of the technology. So let me go back to Eduardo, and why don't you share with us some of what it takes to really have a successful implementation in this space.
Yes, I guess that going back to what you were mentioning before and making sure that benefit that you build on the business case is there is one of the key things that I think most people make a mistake on. Really understanding in the front end and doing your analysis on, what can you actually automate and what cannot be automated based on the number of exceptions that you're handling, understanding what it will actually take to build the automation, to cover the necessary exceptions to get a, I would say, a attractive business case on the automation is one of the key things to take into consideration as you're going into automation. And there's a lot of organizations that really skip that process and go direct into development and building, and then they end up with endless automation, cycles, and really trying to get to the level of automation that was expected, creating unfulfilled expectations from the operation, and then thinking that the technology isn't really right for the organization, which is one of the biggest things that you want to have experience on, and making sure that those are communicated up front. Also doing the steps on really doing the architectural work on how the automations are going to work. What's going to trigger what, when, and how, and making sure that you're choosing the right pieces of technology and building the ecosystem together to really build the automation from end to end, and not having I would guess choppy automations across the organization where people have to go in and re-trigger automations through the process, which is a big thing in understanding the automation landscape out there and different technologies that can work together. Good example is basically being able to actually connect ticketing systems and monitoring systems to items that need to be taken care of, and building those API calls or those tickets being triggering robots to take those actions, and then building the design so that humans are in the loop as necessary based on the exceptions that are coming in. So I think that having that whole picture before you even start your automation journey in IT is going to be a critical step to success.
Mm-hmm. So Eddie, I know you've been doing RPA for some time and automation in general. So what would you say would be the biggest lessons learned that you can share with the audience today? And I'll ask the same way to Brad and Kate.
So to me, it has been, I think that when we started this, is not thinking that this is something that anybody can do is one of the biggest misconceptions, that you can just throw a person in there that knows how to code is going to build great bots. Is a very different technology than regular development. So that's one of the key things, having the right talent in place that has the experience, that have done this in the past, to set you up right and make sure that you're successful. Especially at the beginning, and I think that's one of the biggest lessons learned. We have talked to many clients that they tried to do this on their own without having any experience, and they have stalled their automation program because they were very unsuccessful. They took a lot more time than they thought they were going to take, and that led to stalled investment from the organization and lack of support from the C executives as things went by. And I think that measuring success is not just enough to build it and feel good about the automation that was done, but actually measure the benefit that the automation is bringing, so that there is no subjectivity to the benefit of the automation program within an organization. Those would be my key takeaways.
So how do you see organizations, adopting this technology using, let's say, a partner? So what I hear you saying is you definitely want to have somebody that can really, have the knowledge, of course, up front, pass that knowledge to the organization so they can take those programs on their own if that's needed, or even in some cases outsource the use of the technology and the operation of that technology. So what do you see there
So if I see the cycle of automation within organizations, most organizations start with a partner that has been doing this for a while, that has experience, resources to help them build a pilot program. You're calling it 3 to 4 automations to really test that the technology can bring a lot of benefit to the organization. In the meantime, really taking a look at what can automation really bring to an organization, so that they can have a structured vision around what automation can bring, not just in IT, but around every other area of the company. And then designing the operating model. How's the operating model going to look like afterwards? Are you going to have a third party be involved in the development and support of the bots that have been built? Are you going to build an in-house team? Do you want the third party to train your team? So there is many different reasons why you would go about any of the models. But most organizations will benefit from having a hybrid model where there's in-house resources that can lead, the internal evangelization of automation across the organization. Well, there's a third party with high technical skills that can bring the automations as a successful program to the organization.
Got it. Thank you, Eddie. And Brad,
if I could.
Please.
Yeah. I was going to go back to the business case, because I think, we're talking about implementation, but I think where I see a lot of the customers I work with on the help desk, on the IT side of things, they struggle with the business case. And I think that's what a partner can help with in terms of helping to build that business case, because oftentimes you've got folks that are more technically savvy and understand the technology, but they're trying to build a business case against the finance organization that they're creating a business case around how to automate accounts receivable, how to automate accounts payable, how do I process invoices faster. And I think that's where a partner can really come to play to help the IT organization build that business case based on your past experience. We've got the ROI calculator that helps with that too. So I would, I think there were a lot of good points made around implementation. I don't really have much else to add there, but I think if you're looking pre-implementation around business case, I would say that's kind of a key area where a partner can help a customer.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally agree. It has to start with a strong business case. To the question that was asked, as far as how do you prioritize these initiatives? I mean, that's the key thing is the business case. And sometimes you have tangible things that will drive real savings. Sometimes it's more about performance or quality of the service, which sometimes is hard to quantify. But in general, that those drivers have to be well laid out up front. And I agree that you want to have someone that's been there, done that, and understand what to look for and make these things happening fast for you. Now, Kate, what do you see on your side from a business case? I mean, what type of key savings you say, or good business case, typical business case that you see in the Opsgenie space?
Yeah, I think what we focus on to help folks who are trying to implement something like Opsgenie or Jira Service Management in order to streamline their incident management practice and then some of the other practices as well, is we really hone in on the downtime portion. Because downtime is really expensive and it's very easy to quantify that. There are a lot of different ways you can calculate your downtime, but depending on the size of a company, because obviously if you're speaking to C-levels, numbers are a big driver, right? I mean, yes, if you're working somewhere where there's a lot of manual repetitive work, there are a lot of incidents, there's a lot of problems all of the time, you're not going to be able to hold on to key talent because they want to go elsewhere where they can feel better in their daily job. So that's hard to quantify, but you can quantify financially downtime. It's on average between $5,600 and $9,000 a minute, depending on the size of your organization and then of course your vertical. So that's really how we drive the business case specifically for the incident practice. And I do think you can carry that over, because if you have all these processes that are manual and not automated, there's a lot more human error. So there's certain things that the automated piece is not going to make a mistake on that a human would. And then your employees have more energy and more free time to work on the higher value tasks. So I would say that's a big driver for sure.
Yes, thanks. I agree. Yeah, the key thing there is freed up the time of the resources, because it's like I said, and may sound like a broken record, but complexity has to be addressed with technology. It cannot be addressed with adding more bodies to the problem. That really doesn't help solve this type of complexity issues in IT. It really has to be a combination of putting really good processes in place and putting the right technology to execute those processes as much as possible. And I know that as you start in this journey, you will find that the technology is evolving rapidly by bringing things like AI into operations. I mean, you see that probably a lot in the security space, where you have, if not millions sometimes of alerts coming through multiple systems and attacks and so on. You have to have the smarts of a technology like that to be able to really automate how to deal with those type of events. And the same type of things is happening, in the network operation side, where you're starting to see, if you start early, not early, but if you start right now in this journey, you're going to find that the technology is constantly evolving to actually improve the way things can be automated in the future. So it's definitely the right time to start. So we have one last question on our pool. This is as far as, do you feel like, your managed service providers can help you accelerate your automation journey? And I would like to hear your feedback, if you will. So appreciate your response here. And then we can wrap up. We have a few more minutes, and not sure if there's any other questions that we can ask before we wrap up. But before we show go ahead.
One of the questions is, what opportunities are there for automation in the NOC and typical benefits?
So the NOC, I mean, as you may have heard from Kate in particular, I mean, the NOC, as you know, is collecting and aggregating events from all sorts of different systems for applications, whether it's infrastructure, hardware, cloud providers, whatever. What you want is the technology, and what we've seen is a technology that can automate those alerts. So everything that comes into the NOC has a purpose. Sometimes you have false positives, sometimes you have specific things that really need to be taken care of quickly. So that's where you want to have the automation technology to really decipher what's going on with these alerts, do correlation with the alerts, do incident response with those alerts, notify the right people about what is actually happening in an effective way, not just bombard people with engineering teams or applications teams with nonsense stuff that they have to go and do, deep go and search deeper to find out what's happening. You want to have the intelligence in the systems to be able to determine what's going on based on multiple things that perhaps have happened in the past. And when you don't have, and we have exceptions, that's where you really have the humans having to go and look into it. Those exceptions, once they have been addressed, you want those exceptions to be, taught into the systems. So then next time the systems know what to do. So that's where we see the most amount of advantages on the NOC. We're also seeing another opportunity on the control side of things, depending if your NOC is doing controls or managing controls, like I said earlier with a simple example of backups, right? If the NOC is performing the validation of those backups and making sure that they're solid, then you want to have these systems, these automations, these technologies to really validate that those things are happening. There's absolutely no need to have a human being going and checking if a backup is completed with the technology that is today, or if the patching is being applied to your entire organization, or if your antiviruses are being applied to the entire organization. So those are type of things, super basic controls, I would say, for IT. And then from there, you can build into compliance, things and so on that you can automate to make sure that you're checking that those things are being executed. So it's quite a bit of use cases, and I'll invite you to, whoever asked the question, to really have a conversation and get deeper into how the type of things we're doing in that space as well. No? So here's some of the responses. So yeah, I'm glad to see that you're looking for a partner, and as you heard from the audience, they can help a lot in the business case, not necessarily on the operations and implementation side. You definitely want to start with the business case. I hope that is clear, and that is one of the things that we have. Last thing I would say is we have an offer for you in case you're interested on learning more about RPA. We can definitely reach out to us. You can reach the email that is below. We're not going to bombard you with questions, but we want to, if you're interested in learning more about it, we'll be more than happy to have a consultation to discuss, what automation candidates we see based on our conversations, what kind of solutions and technologies can be applied to those particular automation opportunities, and then really laid out kind of what this is going to look like from an implementation and business case perspective. So if you're interested on the topic, we'll be more than happy to get on the phone with you and spend some time and really help you, start your automation journey if you're not already on that journey already. So with that said, really appreciate everybody's time. I know, Adriana, I'm gonna let you take it from here, and looking forward to speaking with you if you're interested on having more discussions about it. Thank you.
And Adri, before we close, there is a last polling question that we just added on the fly that I think would be relevant just to really understand, you know, out of the organizations that are attending, how many of them are already using RPA specifically in IT versus outside of IT. Because, you know, this can confirm the hypothesis from Alvaro in terms of how maybe it's more being used in the business versus IT. So let's give a couple of seconds to get these responses. And in the meantime, if you wanna, you know, do the housekeeping for the closing,
Yes, go ahead, Adri.
Awesome. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining. And with this last question, we'll close this out. Please look out for our follow-up email. We'll send today's presentation and also the recording so you can review any material that you may have missed, or if you want to simply share it around your organization. As Alvaro mentioned, if you have further questions or if you would like to learn more of ways we can help, or a partner like ourselves can help in your IT automation journey, don't hesitate to reach out to Alvaro, myself, Ryan, or of course, Brad and Kate. And on behalf of Oxys, we want to thank you and our speakers for their time today. Hope you enjoyed the session and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.